Good time of day to all of you, my friends here on Chess.com and everywhere in the world. This is Grandmaster Alex Yermolinsky. Today is Game 4 of the World Championship match. Carlsen is white, and this time he opens the game with c4. Alright, Caruana answers with e5. I think it was rather expected to see Fabiano going into this line, which is essentially a reverse Dragon Sicilian. Well, unlike same positions when white is white, and he has the time to go bishop e6 and queen d7 and then h5, h4 and checkmate, here black just cannot afford this luxury. That extra tempo that white has creates a tactical problem with the move knight takes e5. Therefore, the most common choice for a long time has been to play knight b6, pull that knight back. Many examples of this in recent memory, going back to a Topalov Anand match. Black's very solid. As long as he doesn't try to do too much, it's hard for white to play actively in the center. Well, with colors reversed, such positions are widely accepted by black. Right, because, okay, there are no immediate threats and all that. But when you have the white pieces, you're supposed to have a little bit more. That's why black's been willing to enter the reverse dragon. But in this game, the move bishop c5 was played, which is not a novelty, but still a relatively new chapter in opening theory. Now, what is this? Why is black neglecting the threat of knight takes e5? Well, the answer is here. So knight takes c3. And now if you make good on your threat to take more and emerge with an extra pawn, then you get hit by the move queen f6. This is where that bishop on c5 comes into play. Huge threat of capturing on f2. You must take the knight, your king goes on a run. Basically, white is lost. Better option, of course, is to take back with the b-pawn. But now again, there is this particular point in bishop being developed on the a7 g1 diagonal. Black sacks a pawn, trades queens and goes c6. Actually, as far as I know, this position has never been tested in tournament practice. White just didn't want to go for it. And I wonder why. White is up a pawn. And for now, say he plays a4, he doesn't even have to worry about losing the pawn on f2, because of course the black bishop will get trapped. If not the king coming to take it, it's going to be the rook from f1. So bishop takes f2 is not good, but all in all, I understand why white has been reluctant to enter this position. Well, he has weaknesses on the queen side. The king is kind of walking on d1, the rooks are not coordinated. Black's totally fine. Just play bishop e6, castle long with check, and black's game will play itself. So alright, everybody castles, so did Carlsen. And black also castles. What about knight takes e5 now, you might ask? Well, it's also not really working that well. After knight takes c3, no, you have the same issue. If you continue with knight c6, then it's going to be a problem on f2. Most likely in this order. I mean, there is no way, you take on f2, you're going to be down the exchange. Well, those are examples of typical desperado combinations when you know that your piece or pieces are doomed and you try to get the most for them, because they're going to be lost anyhow. So you always look for ways of capturing something. And here it's exactly what black is able to do. And white is left with no advantage whatsoever. So therefore everybody chooses d3. And now Fabiano played rook e8. Actually, more common is the move bishop b6, which Fabiano already played against Vishy Anand back in 2017. And that game went as follows. Bishop d2, and now rook c1. So white is doing the typical dragon thing, trying to operate on the c-file. Well, black still have to worry about that knight on d5. It's kind of shaky over there. And Fabiano chose to take on c3. Now there was this capture, rook e8, and white expanded on the queen side with b4. This doesn't really seem like super threatening, but white does have a comfortable game. And one problem is, from black's point of view, when you play your knight to d4, then after this capture, white actually is willing to part with the bishop. And you take back with the pawn, then the bishop on b6 remains kind of passive over there. It's restricted by its pawn on d4. And then there is this issue of the pawn on c7, which will come under attack eventually. Well, white will continue expanding with a4 and trying to go a5. It's just a very typical position, which is easy for white to play. And somehow Fabiano went wrong in that game and ended up losing to Anand. So maybe that was considered by Magnus in his preparation. Because I think if he decided to play the English, then this whole thing, up and including bishop c5, was clearly within the realm of possibility of Fabiano's choices. So suppose he counted on that. But once again, similar to game 2, where they entered Queen's Gambit decline, the bishop f4 variation, if you remember that game a few days ago. And Fabiano played a rare move, rook d8, instead of the common rook e8. So once again, somehow he beats Magnus to the punch with his preparation, plays a move that may not even be objectively better, but it's different, and it can only be refuted by tactical means. At least that was the case in game 2, where Magnus did not play the main move knight d2. Here it's somewhat similar. Once again, the move rook e8 is played, and white has a tactical possibility, which was exploited by Fabiano himself with the white pieces, against Mickey Adams, to go knight g5. Now, white is obviously hitting the knight on d5, but he's also eyeing the f7 pawn with various tactical moves. In reply to knight f6, Fabiano continued with queen b3. Now, black obviously doesn't want to go back with the rook to protect f7. So queen e7 was played. Now we have interesting positional possibility of taking on c6 and ruining the pawns. I just don't think it's very effective because black actually has the bishop on c5 that will go back to b6 and will essentially protect everything. There is no exposed pawn on c5. The ideas with bishop takes c6, they work much better in the English opening with c4, c5, when you get to attack the c5 pawn. Here, white doesn't get enough targets. So Fabiano in his game with Adams tried knight d5, which was critical. And after trade of knights, Adams played knight d8. The game went on. I'm not sure, I don't even remember how it ended. I think it was a draw. But it seemed like white had a little bit of something. But maybe Magnus sensed a trap in the move knight d4. Possible improvement. And Caruana, who I assume, and Magnus probably assumes as well, studies his games. He may have looked at this move. And now white has a problem. If you don't take the pawn on f7, then why you started the whole thing? You must. But after king h8, what to do? If you pull the queen back, then extremely annoying is bishop g4. White is unable to play f3. Once again, that's the battery created by that active position of the black bishop on c5. If you go rook e1, there's rook f8. What do? Can you even go back with the bishop and allow all the shots? Like this, and then rook takes f2? could be crushed. No. Doesn't look right. Let's look at the move queen c4. Maybe white can give up the pawn on a2. Well, it's not only about this pawn, and it doesn't have to be taken right away. The most annoying, I believe, is this move, rook f8. Now if white pulls back the bishop to protect e2, then his pieces get tangled up in a terrible way. I don't know what to play, bishop f3, but there is also h6. The knight would have to go, and then black can take on f3. Anyway, first of all, this is not Magnus's cup of tea, right? He doesn't like this type of scenarios. He wants to get set, get his pieces out, reduce the tactical content in the position, and then push. This is how Magnus been winning in chess already for many years. When he has to deal with possibilities such as you see now on the board, he gets nervous. It's just not his kind of chess. And I believe that Fabiano speculates in his opening choices on that particular trait of Magnus's personality. Well, what's gonna happen in the future as the match goes on? I don't know. Would Magnus have to overcome his reluctance to enter positions like this and kind of go for it, running certain risk? I don't think he's willing to do this until the situation in the match gets critical for him. Alright, let's return to the game, and as it goes, I don't really have much to show you. After Magnus played bishop d2, which is similar to what Anand did, right? Rook to c1. There was this difference. First off, knight d4 was played immediately because the rook actually protects the pawn on e5, so black doesn't have to hesitate with this move. And then after b4, most importantly, Fabiano retreated with the bishop to a different place, d6. He's not even bothered by insufficient support to the d4 knight. Because, well, if you take and take over there, and then black takes this pawn. Oh well. What now? I mean, white has central pawns, but they yet to move forward, and they might not be able to move forward because of this frontal pressure against them. I mean, this position doesn't look promising for white at all. And because of the hanging bishop on d4, you know, it takes some time before you can build up your pressure on the b and c files. I think it's about equal. So Magnus chose to play rook b1. And now, of course, the trade on f3 and a6. As it goes in many openings, when the knights disappear from the board, the positions get kind of dull, right? The knights are exciting pieces, they create imbalances and all that stuff, but now it's just hard to see white doing anything aside of the direct plan with b5. But Magnus didn't do this. Why? I bet he wasn't really happy about this. The a5 pawn is a passer, and you probably have to stop it until it goes too far. Don't forget that the other bishop can support it going all the way to a2. So say you play rook a1, and now something like this. What to do? Black's gonna solidify his position on the queen side with b6, and the only thing white's got left is to push in the center. But suppose, I'm just playing some moves, they're not even forced. You do this. I mean, it actually looks attractive for white, but once again, white is really missing knights, right? Knights are the pieces that's supposed to get the job done here. Put the knight on c6 instead of the bishop, that would be a huge difference. As is, you have 4 against 3, but the black bishop is coming to e6, and once again, that pawn, the a-pawn, can move forward. Probably it's about equal. So once again, Magnus wants to keep the tension, but the tension is not really that tense, if you allow me this. I mean, there's hardly a whole lot of pressure on Caruana's position. So he played the solid move bishop d7, pretty much ruling out all ideas with b5. And then offered this trade. Magnus jumped on the possibility of damaging black's pawn structure. But once again, where is that white knight that should come to f5? To make this whole thing work, you need knights. But the knights are all gone. b5, great reply. So black stakes up some space on the queen side and nails down the b4 pawn as potential target. Now, when white hits the pawn on c6, he's gonna counter with pressure against the b4 pawn. It's pretty much the dead end of the game. There is nothing to be done. White simply cannot improve. That 5 against 4 pawn structure on the king side just doesn't offer white any active possibilities. Actually, Fabiano went forward immediately with f5. I guess he figured he could use some room for the king, as it happened in the game, to bring the king over and protect c6. Not a bad idea. If white tried to counter that with an attack on c6, he would get to take the pawn with check, but then what? He cannot protect the b4 pawn. Yeah, this would be a draw, of course, 4-4. Not much different in the game continuation. Just nothing to do here. Draw agreed. Alright. No, well, it's not the first World Championship match that begins with series of draws. It's more of a pattern. Well, pretty much lately, I mean, ever since maybe Anand Kramnik match and Anand Topalov matches, like every World Championship match was like this. Is that the fault of the format? Did modern chess simply has it outlived the format of head-to-head World Championship matches? As much, as the public loves it. We don't know. Well, I'm not gonna go too far and say, alright, it's gonna be 12 draws and then whatever, rapid and blitz. No, there's gonna be decisive games, but no, we feel like, that we have been robbed, of some entertainment and learning and studying material that World Championship matches have always provided to the chess world. Let's just hope, that things change at Game 5. With that, I want to bid you goodbye until day after tomorrow. This is Grandmaster Alex Yermolinsky.